Are you ready for the word?
Yes, sir.
We're going to go to Colossians 2 tonight. If what we're going to do tonight and what I'm going to say tonight wasn't important, we wouldn't keep going over it. If it wasn't important, Yahweh would not have set a yearly appointment for us to rehearse it over and over and over again. Said all that to say that we're going to be rehearsing some stuff, restating some stuff that we state year after year, but it's important, or else Yahweh wouldn't have set a yearly appointment for us to do it. So what we're going to do tonight is look at the resurrection of our Messiah again, and we're going to look at it in light of first fruits. Colossians 2 says this, "Let no man therefore judge you in meat or in drink, or in respect of a holy day, a Moedim, a feast day, or of the new moon, or of the Sabbath days, which are a shadow of things to come, but the body is of Messiah." The word shadow means to outline something. That's what a shadow does. It outlines it. In this case, the outline being given is an outline of the Messiah. The feast give an outline of the Messiah. If you look the Greek word up for shadow, both the Strong's Greek Dictionary and the Young's Greek Dictionary will tell you that the word means adumbration. Adumbration. A-D-U-M-B-R-A-T-I-O-N. Adumbration. Of course, I had to look that word up. But that word means something that gives the main facts. So, what we have here is Colossians 2:16 and 17 telling us that the Moedim, the feast days, give us the main facts about the Messiah. Right? First fruits gives us some main facts about the Messiah. The main fact that first fruits focuses on is it tells us exactly when the Messiah is going to be resurrected. Exactly, precisely when he will be resurrected. Whereas Passover's main fact was it told us exactly when the Messiah would be crucified. Unleavened bread's main fact was that it told us that he died for us to free us from sin and to free us from the bondage of sin. And now first fruits' main fact is it tells us exactly when he's going to be resurrected. No wonder the enemy worked so hard getting people to ignore the feast. Because these shadows are essential. Without the shadow, people are easily deceived into worshiping a false Messiah. If you don't have the shadow, the main facts, then somebody else over here can be an imposter and say they're the Messiah when they're really not, if you don't know the shadow, if you don't know the main facts. The only way to be deceived into worshiping a false Messiah is to have no idea what the true Messiah looks like. And if your denomination never teaches you about the feast, and then your denomination prevents you from seeing the real Messiah, and they can preach to you and get you to believe in a Messiah who rose on Sunday, who changed and eliminated the Sabbath, who frees you from keeping the law, whose love for you, he loves for you to show your faith in him by refusing to submit to the law. That's the Messiah that they preach. The only way to lead people astray and to have them follow an antichrist is to convince them they're not to study Torah. And the only way to worship a Messiah who doesn't keep the Sabbath and who was resurrected on a Sunday is to ignore the feast of Yahweh. The feasts tell us the truth about the real Messiah. Let's just summarize for a minute. The feast tells us that our Messiah was a lamb without blemish. He went into the Father's house on Abib 10, just as Exodus 12:3 said he would. And according to John 12:12 and Mark 11, verses 1 through 11, he goes into Yahweh's house on the 10th. He was slain on the 14th day of the first month between the evenings, just as Exodus 12:6 said he had to be. And according to Luke 23:44, he died at 3 p.m. between the evenings. He was buried on Abib 14 and in the tomb on Abib 15, making Abib 15 the mega Sabbath that Exodus 12:42 declared it to be. According to John 19:31, our Messiah was taken from the cross and laid in a tomb by Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus hurriedly, because the high Sabbath of Abib 15 was approaching quickly upon them. That's not the weekly Sabbath that Joseph and Nicodemus are up against. How do we know it's not the weekly Sabbath? Because it was called a high day. No Sabbath was ever called a high day except for that special Sabbath of Abib 15. Yeshua died on the 14th. Exodus 12:42, John 19:31 tells us that the 15th was a high day or mega Sabbath. The true Messiah fits perfectly every detail of the outline of the first two feasts. And we know for a fact the exact day that the Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit, came. What day did it come? When was the Holy Spirit given? When in Pentecost?
When it was fully come?
When the day of Pentecost was fully come. Exactly, precisely on time. Right? So we have four feasts. We have Passover, unleavened bread, first fruits, and Shavuot, or Pentecost. And we know for a fact when we read the scriptures that he died exactly when Passover said he would. He was buried and in the tomb exactly as unleavened bread portrays. The Holy Spirit came exactly when Pentecost said he would. So doesn't it stand to reason that first fruits is going to show us exactly when he's going to be resurrected? Right? It would be a serious error that would result in a dangerously false doctrine to interpret the date of first fruits to be on any other day than the one that perfectly foreshadows his resurrection. It's only reasonable to conclude that if Passover perfectly outlined when he would enter into the temple and when he would be slain, and if unleavened bread perfectly outlined how his death delivered us from sin, and if Pentecost perfectly outlined the exact day when the Holy Spirit will come, then first fruits has to and does perfectly outline for us when he would be raised from the dead. And if you don't understand what these feasts tell you about the Messiah, you end up being convinced to worship a Messiah who died on Friday and rose on Sunday. And tells you don't have to obey Yahweh's law anymore. Well, I'm here to tell you tonight, he didn't die on Friday, he didn't rise on Sunday, and he didn't free us from Torah. All three of those things are a lie. So let's talk about when he did die and when he did rise. We're not told the day he died. We can calculate that based on a lot of the information that we're given, but the day is not important. What we're told is the date that he died. That's what's important. He died on Abib 14 between the evenings. And as I said earlier, Luke told us that it was at the 9th hour or at 3 p.m. Knowing that, we can easily know the exact date that he rose from the dead. How can we know the exact date that he rose from the dead? Two ways. Number one, first fruits will tell you. Number two, Yeshua himself will tell you. Let's first look at what Yeshua repeatedly said about his resurrection. Then we'll come back to how first fruits perfectly foreshadows the resurrection. Matthew 16:21. I'm going to go to these rapidly, quickly. If you can get there, then great. We'll read them together. We're going to be in Matthew 16, Matthew 17, and Matthew 20. Matthew 16:21. From that time forth, began Yeshua to show unto his disciples how that he must go into Jerusalem and suffer many things of the elders and chief priests and scribes and be killed and be raised again when? The third day. I remember spending days, weeks, and months studying this subject and becoming frustrated trying to make the pattern that first fruits had foreshadowed, trying to make that pattern fit together, mesh together with the information that the Gospels had given to me. And for a long time, I couldn't make them mesh because I thought the Bible said, it had been embedded in my thinking. So even though I was reading it, my mind was computing something different than what was actually written on the page. We've all done that, right? It was right there for me to see, but I wasn't seeing it because my brain had been conditioned, right? I thought it said after 3 days, but it doesn't. And that's huge. He says he'll be raised again the third day. Plainly, it says that. Not after 3. Matthew 17:22. And when they abode in Galilee, Yeshua said unto them, the Son of Man shall be betrayed into the hands of men, and they shall kill him, and the third day he shall be raised again. And they were exceeding sorry. There it is again. And at first it seems like a minor point, but it's not minor. Pardon me. The more you study it, the more you see how essentially important that distinction is. Not after 3 days, but the third day. That's why Yeshua keeps repeating it. Matthew 20, verse 17. And Yeshua, going up to Jerusalem, took the 12 disciples apart in the way and said unto them, behold, we go up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man shall be betrayed into the chief priests and unto the scribes, and they shall condemn him to death. And they'll deliver him to the Gentiles to mock and to scourge and to crucify him, and the third day he shall rise again. He repeatedly said the same thing over and over and over. Let's look at another passage. And this time we'll get the testimony of angels. Luke 24. I'm going to take the time to read this narrative beginning in verse 1. Now upon the first day of the week, very early in the morning, they came into the sepulchre, bringing the spices which they had prepared, and certain others with them, and they found the stone rolled away from the sepulchre. And they entered in and found not the body of the Master Yeshua. And it came to pass, as they were much perplexed thereabout, behold, 2 men stood by them in shining garments. And as they were afraid and bowed down their faces to the earth, they said unto them, the angels in the tomb said to these women, why do you seek the living among the dead? He's not here, but is risen. Remember how he spake unto you when he was yet in Galilee, saying, the Son of Man, this is what he said. And angels never misquote. The angels said, he said this to you in Galilee, the Son of Man must be delivered into the hands of sinful men and be crucified, and the third day rise again. That's a verbatim quote. Don't y'all remember that he said that? So, if first fruits gives us the main facts about Yeshua's resurrection, and if first fruits is the perfect pattern and shadow of his resurrection, when is first fruits going to take place? People argue over what is meant in Leviticus 23. Why don't you go ahead and turn there? We're going to read it. And I think the arguments are absolutely unnecessary. I see no merit in the arguments. In order to know when first fruits actually takes place, all you have to do is be able to count. And you don't have to be able to count very far. If he died on the 14th, and he said, I'll be raised the third day, that's easy to calculate. 14, 15, started wrong. 16. 14, 15, 16. The third day I will rise. So if first fruits is the shadow of Yeshua being resurrected, it has to take place on the 16th. Leviticus 23:9. And Yahweh spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them, When you come into the land which I give unto you, and shall reap the harvest thereof, then you shall bring a sheaf of the first fruits of your harvest unto the priest. He'll wave the sheaf before Yahweh to be accepted for you. And when is he going to wave this sheaf? On the morrow after the Sabbath, the priest shall wave it. And you understand that that's where the argument begins with so many. It causes debates and disagreements because most people argue and believe that first fruits has to come on the day after the seventh day Sabbath. That's what most people think. And if that's so, then the morrow after the seventh day Sabbath is always the first day of the week. And those who declare this to be so are adamant that the 15th, which is the first day of unleavened bread, is not a Sabbath. They say it's not. But the truth is, the Sabbath referred to in Leviticus 23:11 is the Sabbath of unleavened bread on the 15th, and it is a Sabbath. How can we know that it is an undeniable, unshakable fact that it's a Sabbath? It's easy. Exodus 12:42 says, It is a night to be much observed unto Yahweh. Talking about the night they were delivered. That is on the 15th. Exodus 12:42, it's a night to be much observed. That word, the words much observed is translated from that one beautiful, powerful Hebrew word, shamar. Shamar means to protect, to shield, to put a thorn hedge around something, to watch over it and guard it, okay? So in the very beginning of this event, Yahweh marked the 15th day of Abib as being extremely valuable and set apart. You are to shamar the 15th. Leviticus 23:6 says, And on the 15th day of the same month is the feast of unleavened bread unto Yahweh. 7 days you must eat unleavened bread. In the first day you shall have a holy convocation. You shall do no servile work therein. So notice the instruction there in Leviticus 23:6 and 7. We're to do two things on the first day of unleavened bread, which is the 15th. We're to have a holy convocation and do no servile work. Exodus 12:42 said, mark it. Set it aside, set it apart, guard it, protect it. Leviticus 23:6 and 7 says, have a holy convocation and do no servile work. Those two things identify the 15th day of Abib as a Sabbath. It's not just a Sabbath, it is a mega Sabbath. People argue that instruction in Leviticus 23 does not use the word Sabbath. I can't comprehend that argument because when it says do no servile work, it's left no doubt that it is a Shabbat. It's a rest. It's a Sabbath. So here's what we have so far. Exodus 12:42 says, shamar this day. Leviticus 23:11 says, have a holy convocation and do no servile work. And then we read this in John 19:31. The Jews, therefore, because it was the preparation that the body should not remain upon the cross on the Sabbath day, for that Sabbath day was a high day, besought Pilate that their legs might be broken and that they might be taken away. This is not a weekly Sabbath. They did not ever call a weekly Sabbath a high day. This word in the Greek is mega. This was a mega day. So, notice notice that John in his gospel refers to the 15th day in two ways. He calls it a Sabbath day and he calls it mega. A Sabbath day and mega. So, there should be no doubt in our minds that Leviticus 23 is locating first fruits as the day after the 15th. Well, if it's located the day after the 15th, when is it? The 16th, right? The second reason I believe first fruits follows Abib 15 is because it is the only day that perfectly creates a pattern that would foreshadow the resurrection, because Yeshua made there was nothing confusing about what he said. He said, the third day I will, right? So let's think about it. The 14th day of the first month can fall on any day of the week. Am I right? When's your birthday?
June 17th.
June 17th. Does it fall on the same day every year? Nope. No, it doesn't. It can fall on any day, right? It varies from year to year. Abib 14, therefore, could fall on any day. So what if Abib 14 fell on a Monday? Right? And then you're saying that first fruits has to come after the weekly Sabbath. So you got the 14th, 15th, 16th. Well, let's do it this way. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. You would have 7 days from the 14th to first fruits. That pattern won't work. Right? And so what you're saying is, well, every now and then it would work. Because it might fall on a Wednesday and then it would work. Well, then that makes it a coincidence and not a pattern. In order for it to be a pattern, it has to work every time precisely. So it can't be the first fruits falls after the weekly Sabbath. All right? You get the point. Yahweh's always precise in his patterns. His patterns are always perfect, and his events always perfectly fit the pattern. If first fruits comes after the weekly Sabbath, there is only one time every few years when the pattern would work. And as I said, that's coincidence. And Yahweh's feasts are appointed times. They are appointed times, not coincidences. So, there's only one day that can be first fruits that always perfectly foreshadows the resurrection, and that's the morrow after the Sabbath of unleavened bread. Abib 14, Passover, day 1. Abib 15, unleavened bread, day 2. Abib 16, first fruits, day 3. Yeshua said, I'll rise the third day. And first fruits perfectly shows that. And it doesn't matter what day the 14th falls on. It can fall on any day it wants to. The 16th is always the third day after it. Always. So, it's a fact that he was resurrected on the 16th of Abib, and I declare that fact cannot be denied. But when you read the Gospels, you're going to see that translators did some shady things in order to hide that fact from you. All 4 Gospel writers agree completely about when the women arrived at the tomb. All 4 of them say the exact same thing. So we're going to look at those real quick. Matthew chapter 28, Mark chapter 16, Luke chapter 24, John chapter 20. Matthew 28. And the end of the Sabbath, as it began to dawn toward the first day of the week, came Mary Magdalene and the other Mary to see the sepulchre. When did they come? King James says they came the first day of the week. Mark 16, verse 2. Let me read verse 1 too. When the Sabbath was past, Mary Magdalene and Mary the mother of James and Salome had bought sweet spices that they might come and anoint him. And very early in the morning, the first day of the week, they came to the sepulchre at the rising of the sun. Luke 24, verse 1. That's some interesting wording there. You need to mark that one. We'll come back to it. But Boy, they like to say, well, the Sabbath had passed, and so they came early on the first day of the week. They did some shady stuff there. Luke 24, verse 1. Now upon the first day of the week, very early in the morning, they came into the sepulchre, bringing the spices which they had prepared, and certain others with them. So Luke tells us the same thing Matthew and Mark did on the first day of the week. John 20, verse 1. The first day of the week came Mary Magdalene early, when it was yet dark, unto the sepulchre, and saw the stone taken away from the sepulchre. So all four agree they came on the first day of the week. However, in the Greek, it does not say that they came on the first day of the week. All four Gospels completely agree when the women came to find the empty tomb, but translators decided to hide that fact from us. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John all declared the same fact. All four of them said in the Greek that these women came to the tomb when? Do you remember? Say it out loud. Mia Sabbaton. All four of them. Mia Sabbaton. The word Sabbaton is found in your New Testament 68 times. 61 times it gets translated as Sabbath. Its definition is Sabbath. It's translated as week only 7 times, and those 7 times are all in reference to the resurrection. In other words, deceitful men wanted you to believe in a Messiah who rose on Sunday and made Sunday holy, so they intentionally changed the definition of Sabbaton from Sabbath to first day of the week. They intentionally did that because they want you to worship a Messiah that rose on Sunday, made Sunday holy, so you would forsake the Sabbath. If they can get you to believe in a Messiah who rose on Sunday, they can convince you that you should forsake the Sabbath, that Sunday's now the holy day, made so by his resurrection, but all of that is a lie. The resurrection did not happen on a Sunday. And if you have to lie to create your doctrine has no truth in it. The women did not come to the tomb on a Sunday. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John all say the exact same thing. They came on Mia Sabbaton. And we know what Sabbaton means. It means Sabbath. What does Mia mean? 1. Well, that's a strange phrase. They came on Sabbath number 1. What could that possibly mean? Why would all four of them say that these women showed up on Sabbath number 1? All you have to do to understand what we read here is to read Leviticus 23. That's all you got to do. Because Leviticus 23 tells you that from first fruits, the day of first fruits, you start counting. And what are you going to count? 50 days and 7 Sabbaths. So from first fruits, you're going to count 50 days. And then you're going to come up and you're going to say, oh, this is Sabbath number 1. And then you're going to say, this is Sabbath number 2. Actually, there's a place, I didn't mark it for tonight, but there's a place where it says the disciples were going through the wheat fields, rubbing grain in their hands, and it was a Deutero-Sabbaton. They were doing that on Sabbath number 2. See? They counted toward the Sabbaths. All right? So that's all this meant here. Abib 17, according to the timeline that year, had to be a weekly Sabbath, Sabbath number 1, because it's the Sabbath that follows first fruits, and first fruits is when you begin your count according to the book of Leviticus. They are not at the tomb on a Sunday morning, is the point. They are at the tomb on Sabbath number 1, counting towards Shavuot. However, and hallelujah, this is a very important part. And I didn't discover this through lots of study. It was revealed to me as I thought on these things. Yeshua was not resurrected on the day the women came to the tomb. He appeared to them that day. But that's not the day of his resurrection. He was resurrected on the 16th, which was the day before they found the stone rolled away. So how can we know that for a fact? Well, we know it for a fact because first fruits is a perfect, precise pattern. And we know it for a fact because Yeshua repeated himself over and over. He was going to rise the third day. People hear that and they start doing a different math than the math I'm doing. The math should be 14 is day 1, 15 is day 2, 16 is day 3. That's the math we should do. But there are other people who start doing a different math. They bring up the sign of Jonah. And they say a resurrection on the 16th doesn't add up. Because that doesn't allow, that's 3 days, but it's not 3 nights. And he has to be in the tomb 3 days and 3 nights, right? So they say he couldn't have been resurrected until the 17th. But that's impossible. It's impossible because first fruits is a perfect, precise pattern that Yeshua gave us. And it's impossible because Yeshua did not say that he would be resurrected after 3 days and 3 nights. I admit he mentioned the sign of Jonah, but we have to listen carefully to what he said. Matthew 12:40. I know you know this stuff. So do I. But we need to rehearse it. Matthew 12:40. For as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the whale's belly, so shall the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights. Where? Doesn't say in the tomb, does it? 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. With that information, everything written in our Bibles now makes sense. Ephesians 4, verse 8. Wherefore he said, when he ascended up on high, he led captivity captive and gave gifts unto men. Now that he ascended, what is it but that he also descended first into the lower parts of the earth? He that descended is the same also that ascended up far above all heavens, that he might fill all things. Verse 8 declared that Yeshua led captivity captive when he ascended. He led captivity captive. In order to do that, he had to first descend to where captivity was. Captivity was Tartarus. Tartarus had held him captive on day 14. Tartarus had held him captive on day 15. But on day 16, he came alive. He was made alive by his Father. And when he was made alive on day 16, he took away the keys from death and Hades. Nobody had ever walked out of Tartarus, ever. But Yahweh raised him from the dead on the 16th. And on the 16th, he walks out of that place. Listen to what Peter said. For the Messiah also has once suffered for sins, the just for the unjust, that he might bring us to Yahweh, being put to death in the flesh, but made alive by the Spirit, by which he also went. he was made alive by the Spirit, by which he also went and preached unto the spirits in prison. What spirits is he preaching to? Verse 20. Those which sometimes were disobedient, when once the long suffering of Yahweh waited in the days of Noah, while the ark was preparing, wherein few, that is 8 souls, were saved by water. Listen to what it says. He was made alive by the Spirit. And when he was made alive, First Fruits tells us, and Yeshua tells us that happened on the 16th. But when he was made alive, what did he do? He went into the lower parts of the earth to preach to the spirits that had been imprisoned there, according to the book of Enoch. They are in the lower parts of the earth. So he's made alive on the 16th. He goes there to that place, not to preach redemption to them, but to seal their fate. To let them know that little experiment y'all ran in Genesis 6 and in Enoch 6, that little experiment didn't work. You haven't destroyed Yahweh's creation. We have conquered, and we are rulers, and you will be here forever. Hallelujah. He preached to them. He proclaimed truth to them. With that information in hand, now let's read John 20. Yeshua appears to Mary at the tomb, which would have been not on the 16th, but on the 17th, and I'll show you that clearly in a minute. Clearly, it's on the 17th. But keep this in your mind when we read this in John 20, that this is taking place on Mia Sabbaton, Sabbath number 1, which is the 17th day of the month of Abib. Verse 11, but Mary stood without at the sepulchre weeping, and as she wept, she stooped down and looked into the sepulchre, and she saw 2 angels in white sitting, the one at the head, the other at the feet, where the body of Yeshua had lain. And they said unto her, Woman, why do you weep? She said unto them, Because they've taken away my master, and I know not where they've laid him. And when she had said thus, she turned herself back and saw Yeshua standing, but didn't know it was Yeshua. And Yeshua said unto her, Woman, why do you weep? Who do you seek? She, supposing him to be the gardener, said unto him, Sir, if you have borne him hence, if you're the one that took him out of that tomb and you've carried him somewhere, tell me where you laid him and I'll take him away. What did you do with him? Yeshua said unto her, Mary. That's all he had to say. All he had to do is call her name. She turned herself and said unto him, Rabboni, which is to say, master or teacher. Teacher. Yeshua said unto her, Do not touch me, for I am not yet ascended to my Father. But go to my brethren and say unto them, I ascend unto my Father and your Father, to my Elohim and your Elohim. So there's a difference between his resurrection and his appearing. When he was resurrected, he had work to do in the lower parts of the earth, and he did that. Now that work's done on the 16th, on the 17th he appears. He was in the lower parts of the earth 3 days and 3 nights. But in order to accomplish what he had to accomplish in the lower parts of the earth, he had to be made alive. He had to be resurrected. He was resurrected in a glorified body. That's the reason there's not a body in the tomb anymore. His body had been changed to a glorified body. And now he's resurrected in the lower parts of the earth. On the 3rd day he gets resurrected, but he stays down there, and he's there for a total of 3 days and 3 nights. All right? So here he is on Sabbath number 1 appearing to Mary, saying, I haven't yet ascended. He stood up in Tartarus. He took the keys of death and Hades. He proclaimed doom to the fallen spirits, and then came forth out of a place that no man had ever come forth out of. And then he appears to Mary on day number 4 and told her he had not yet ascended to the Father. So, the point is, Yeshua was raised on the 16th. Why do we know he was raised on the 16th? Because it's the 3rd day. But he did not appear until his work was done in the heart of the earth. He appeared after the 3rd day and the 3rd night on the 4th day. It's essential that we do not bring preconceived ideas into the reading of Scripture. If we just let them say what they say, we must make sure we see the difference between his resurrection and his appearing, and that we don't blend the two. One speaks of his resurrection, one speaks of his appearing. Resurrected on the 16th, appeared on the 17th. Resurrected on the 3rd day, appearing after 3 days and 3 nights. Let's look closely at Mark's details. And this will help us clearly see what I'm saying. Mark chapter 15. When Mark wrote this gospel, what was the gauge he used to divide it up into chapters and verses? What are you laughing at, Glenn? He didn't divide it. He wrote an epistle or a gospel, a letter. Men divided it. It's important to know. Mark 15:43, Joseph of Arimathea, an honorable counselor, which also waited for the kingdom of Yahweh, came and went in boldly unto Pilate and craved the body of Yeshua. And Pilate marveled if he were already dead, and calling unto him the centurion, he asked him whether he had been any while dead. And when he knew it of the centurion, he gave the body to Joseph. And he bought fine linen and took him down and wrapped him in the linen and laid him in a sepulchre which was hewn out of a rock, and rolled a stone unto the door of the sepulchre. And Mary Magdalene and Mary the mother of Joseph beheld where he was laid. Mark that. Mary Magdalene and Mary the mother of Joseph beheld where he was laid. What day was he laid in that tomb? The 14th day. There you go. He was laid in the tomb because they're hurrying to get him in before nightfall. Nightfall starts 15th. But he's laid in the tomb on the 14th of Abib. So Mary and Mary are watching him be placed in a tomb very late in the day on the 14th. Sunset began on the 15th. John 19 told us that he had to be taken down, buried before the mega Sabbath of the 15th. Now, read on, no chapters, no verses. Mary Magdalene and Mary the mother of Joseph beheld where he was laid. Verse 1. And when the Sabbath was, chapter 16, verse 1. And when the Sabbath was past, Mary Magdalene and Mary the mother of James and Salome had bought sweet spices that they might come and anoint him. And very early in the morning, the first day of the week, Mia Sabbaton, they came into the sepulchre at the rising of the sun. Do you see what Mark did in those 3 verses? Verse 47 of Mark 15, verses 1 and 2 of Mark 16. Do you see what Mark did in those 3 verses? He summarized for us the activities of 4 different days. Mark 15:47. What day was that? The 14th. Mark 16:1. When the Sabbath was past. What Sabbath would that be? Abib 15. See what he did? They watched him be buried, put in a tomb, They couldn't do anything about it because that mega Sabbath came as soon as he's placed in that tomb. So when that Sabbath was passed, chapter 16, verse 1 says, when the Sabbath was passed, what day would that be? 16, thank you. When the Sabbath was passed on Abib 16, Mark tells us they went and bought spices that they had to bring home and prepare. John 20 told us they had to prepare them. They didn't just buy them ready-made so they could go straight to the tomb. They had to go to the market, buy them, come home, and prepare them. They could do that on Abib 16 because it wasn't a Sabbath. Okay? Mark 16:2. Then very early in the morning on Sabbath number 1. That has to be Abib 17. The first Sabbath counting toward Pentecost. So 4 days in 3 verses. You see it? Abib 14, 15, 16, and 17. Nothing Mark said makes any sense unless you understand Torah. Then it all makes perfect sense. How could a Sabbath be passed and then it dawning toward another Sabbath? They changed the translation so you wouldn't know that's what it was doing. But that's exactly what happened. And then there's a span of time in between the 2 Sabbaths. How do we know? Because they went and bought spices. 4 days, 4 days summarized in 3 verses. First fruits is the amazing, awesome pattern that Yahweh gave to us to reveal to us when the true Messiah would be resurrected. So don't believe the lie about a Jesus who was resurrected on a Sunday morning. That's a lie perpetuated in order to promote a false Messiah who is anti-Torah. The Messiah that is preached who rose on Sunday is an antichrist figure that's saturated in wickedness. And don't get confused by those who tell you that Abib 15 is not a real Sabbath. It clearly is. And it has to be in order for Yahweh's pattern to work perfectly. And his patterns always do work perfectly. So what are we to do on first fruits? Well, number 1, we use it to identify the true Messiah who was resurrected on the 16th. They can't lie to us and say he's resurrected on Sunday. We say, no, he's resurrected on the 16th. The priest symbolized his resurrection according to Leviticus 23, verse 9 through 11. I'm going to read those. They symbolized that first fruits reveals the resurrection. It says, Yahweh spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the children of Israel, saying to them, when you come into the land which I have given to you, you shall reap the harvest thereof. Then you shall bring a sheaf of the first fruits of your harvest unto the priest. And you'll wave the sheaf before Yahweh to be accepted for you on the morrow after the Sabbath. The priest shall wave it. This, I don't believe, is a first fruit offering. It's a symbolic sheaf. The barley's still in a Abib stage, so it's not full harvest time. It's a symbolic sheaf that is brought to the priest for a very specific purpose. What's the priest supposed to do with it?
Wave it.
Wave it. What's the significance of waving it?
Show that it's alive.
There you go. If the sheaf is cut down, if you know anything about barley, if the sheaf is cut down and brought to the priest on Abib 16, it got cut down before its time.
Big.
It got cut down before its time. It's taken out of the field on purpose, but it's taken out early in its life. That perfectly symbolizes our Messiah. He was taken out on purpose, but he was also taken out early in his life. But that sheaf is brought to the priest on the 16th, and the priest does a very peculiar thing. He doesn't embrace it. He doesn't lay it down on the altar. He waves it. Look that word up. It means to make it quiver, to vibrate, up and down. It means to cause it to rock to and fro. What's he doing? He's causing that sheaf to look like it did before it was taken out of the field. He's making it look alive again. One of the primary ways that Yeshua knew exactly when he was going to be resurrected is he saw the picture and understood the picture that first fruits showed him. That on the third day, the Father was going to take him in his hand and make him alive again. So, this isn't so much about bringing a first fruits offering when we gather here tonight. Deuteronomy 16 tells us that our offering is brought during Shavuot, after we've brought in the entirety of our harvest. After we've seen how much Yahweh has blessed us, then during Shavuot, we bring a tribute to Yahweh, a free will offering to say thank you for blessing me as you have. So, I'm saying that to say there's no first fruit offering tonight. We'll count 50 days from now and 7 Sabbaths, and then we'll bring a tribute to Yahweh. There are scriptures that exhort us to give of the first fruits of all of our increase to Yahweh. But this is the first fruits of all of our increase that Shavuot's calling for. Proverbs 3:9 says this, honor Yahweh with your substance and with the first fruits of all your increase. So shall your barns be filled with plenty, and your wine presses, or your presses shall be burst out with new wine. That's not specifically tied to the feast of first fruits. That's talking about all of our increase. So, I said all that to say, tonight what we do is celebrate the resurrection. Hallelujah. Paul said it this way. Now is the Messiah risen from the dead. This is 1 Corinthians 15:20. Now is the Messiah risen from the dead and become the first fruits of them that slept. For since by man came death, by man came also the resurrection of the dead. For as in Adam all die, even so in the Messiah shall all be made alive. But every man in his own order. The Messiah, the first fruits. Afterward, they that are the Messiahs at his coming. So do you see the picture? Just as that sheaf was harvested alone by itself to bring to the priest, Yeshua was harvested alone and made alive. And at the proper time, Yahweh will go into the field and harvest the rest of his crop. And he will do for them what he did for Yeshua. He'll make them alive too. Yeshua is the first fruit. So, stand up. Any comment about first fruits, or the dates, or the 16th, or the 17th, or 3 days, or 3 nights? Hallelujah. We met tonight because tonight starts Abib 16. I had originally set it up for tomorrow night, but we'd have been hard pressed to get it in before the sunset. And I don't want to shortchange my celebration of the resurrection. I've got the rest of the night and all day tomorrow to celebrate his resurrection. And I'm glad I get to do it with you tonight. But the priest would take a sheaf, longer than this one, but he would take a sheaf And he'd take that thing and he'd dance it and just make that thing quiver and look like it was blowing in the wind. And I wonder how many thousands of years they did that before the eternal significance of it was seen.
Yeah.
They just kept rehearsing until Yeshua was raised from the dead on the very day that they waved the sheaf. Hallelujah. Much like you and I keep shouting at Yom Teruah,
Yeah.
waiting for the day that the rehearsal becomes a reality when our shout's rounded out by the shout of the archangels. On the day that the priest in Jerusalem was waving that sheaf, Yahweh had raised Yeshua from the dead down in the lower parts of the earth, and he was taking captivity captive. What a Messiah. What a Savior. Amen. Yahweh bless you and keep you. Yahweh make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. Yahweh lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. As his name is put upon you, so shall he himself bless you.